Welcome to Original Being, where we explore the timeless wisdom of ancient practices and old ways of living. From holistic health and wellness to survival techniques, homesteading, and primitive skills. I'm Jillian Ariz, a functional and holistic-minded physician associate and a homesteading mother of 3. I am on a quest to reconnect with this knowledge our ancestors lived by, practical skills, natural healing, and self-sufficiency in a modern world. Each episode, I'll be sharing insights, experiences, and conversations with experts and everyday people who embody this mindset. Together, we'll challenge modern conveniences, embrace hands-on learning, and rediscover the practices that have stood the test of time. Disclaimer, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. My opinions and those of my guests are solely our own and are not affiliated with any institutions, employers, or certifications. This podcast does not provide medical advice, and any health-related decisions should be made in consultation with your personal healthcare provider. By listening, you acknowledge that you take full responsibility for your own choices and actions.
Today on Original Being, we have Coleen Butler. Coleen is a hide tanner and founder of Close to the Skin, a business that provides education on how to naturally tan hides, as well as produces hand-tanned goods for home and body. She is passionate about living an animal-based lifestyle and curious about the intersection of bioregional wild living and health and wellness. Hi, Coleen.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great.
So I'd love to hear how you got to where you are. Like, what's your background? Where do you come from? How'd you end up where you are right now?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I actually grew up outside of Philly in a suburb called King of Prussia. It's the largest mall in America, if anyone wants to know.
I didn't know that.
So that's like how I grew up. And so I didn't grow up in the woods. And I think I grew up with a family and a mom and dad who really loved nature and kind of just like put me outside a lot. And I played under the pine tree. And yeah, as I grew up to be an adult, I was really into food and how that would, heal my body or that relationship with food and myself. I always felt really rich when I knew where my food came from. So I became a farmer and started working on a bunch of farms and was really curious about animal work in particular and started working as like the butcher and the skinner. And in that, I guess I saw how much hides were thrown out and was really curious about what to do with them. And that kind of put me on this journey of becoming pretty obsessed with hide tanning and then put me on a journey of being like, well, I'm farming this food and this is really interesting, but I wonder what's going on in the woods and the forest. And so I stopped farming and I started hunting. And so I could learn about the creatures of the woods and the woods in general. So yeah, it's kind of like parallel, like starting off with the farm and yeah.
How did you learn hide tanning?
Oh, well, I went to a school called the Wilderness Awareness School in Washington State.
Oh, wow.
And in that school, we had a buckskin tanning class. And so that was my first introduction. And my partner at the time was really into tanning hides. So it was really fun because as soon as that class happened, we kind of took off. And I just became obsessed with it. It was like our favorite way of spending time together and, just my favorite way of spending time.
So you started with the buckskins, not the sheepskin.
I started with buckskins, yeah. And honestly, buckskin is my favorite thing to tan still.
Okay, I didn't know that. And then how did you transition into the sheepskin?
I transitioned into sheepskins just because it's there's a big resource of sheepskins, and it's a way I can make a profit off of tanning hides. Ideally, I would be tanning hides a little differently, but I do that for myself, and yeah, it's a way that I can make money and make a living.
What do you mean you'd be tanning them a little differently?
Well, I would, in an ideal world, I live in northern rural Vermont, and my neighbor right now, he is an old Vermonter. I love him so much. I spent a lot of time hunting with him. And when he was little, he made a lot of money off of trapping animals and, sending them to tanneries. I would love to, support that system, that there would be still old trappers in Vermont and be able to tan for them and be tanning, wild furs in really natural ways, like either brain tanning or bark tanning with the natural barks around me. But unfortunately, in this day and age, I can't make a living off of that because I'm competing with big either alum tanneries or commercial chem tanneries and their prices. So I can do that for myself and I can do that for my neighbor when he has a hide, but I can't do that on a big scale. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to support myself.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's something that not everyone knows or understands about things that are tanned and leathers that are made and furs in a commercial place are using a lot of really horrible carcinogenic chemicals. And so that's why these naturally tanned hides and these naturally tanned sheepskins, which I know are, well, at least I see more on social media because I'm following these people. I don't know if everyone sees that, but they are more expensive because of the work and the effort that goes into it and the natural materials. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and the difference in what a commercial tanner does versus what you do?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's like, I like to think of it as sometimes as like a farming, or in the way of farming. So like small organic farms, say, that are just in a neighborhood or something, they're giving life to that soil. They're putting in compost. They're not taking too much out of it. That land can hold it. Whereas if it's like a big factory farm that's just producing like a monocrop of corn per se, that isn't holding that ecosystem. Neither is it feeding those people that live in that neighborhood, but it's also, putting a lot of pesticides and chemicals into the soil that isn't replenishing it. Similarly, tanning is so similar to that. So big chemical tanneries, right? They are using a heck of a lot of water and a heck of a lot of chemicals that are going into our soils and waters, like formaldehydes and plastics, that aren't. It's not great for our earth or for our soils or water. Whereas like small organic tanneries, they're using natural materials, so either barks or brains or fats, and they're producing it at a small scale, so that scale is that region can hold it, right? The scale that I'm producing, the hide that I'm turning over, is giving back to my land. It's becoming compost for my soil. It's like all the water is going back, just like feeding the soil. There's nothing that's going into the soil or the water that is harmful. And you can't say that about big chemical tanneries. But they can produce really, really soft hides and produce a lot of them at a really cheap price. It's just the cost is at our, the health of both our bodies, but our waters and soils.
And you have to think about the fact that you're honoring the animal that you're working with, like you personally, but I think most small hide tanners are like acutely aware that this was an animal that either they harvested themselves or someone else did, and that they're working with each individual skin as an individual animal. Whereas I imagine at a commercial mass scale hide tanning place, it's like factory farming. There's no consciousness or awareness of that animal that a person's working with.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel that every day. It's like, it's hard to not, it's hard to not feel that when I'm literally like taking this raw, bloody, skin and transforming it. Like I feel that transformation. I feel that animal on me all the time. Yeah.
And that also goes back to the name of your business, Close to the Skin. I think I remember the first time I met you at Moose Ridge Gathering, you had this conversation about what's touching your skin, the clothing that's touching your skin, and not just commercially tanned hides, but polyester and other clothing and the chemicals that are seeping into your skin. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I like to think a lot about health and wellness in my life. And so like what I'm eating and what I'm putting into my body, but also what I'm putting on my body. And I just like to think about just as if I were putting lotion on my body that had a bunch of chemicals in it, like if I'm wearing plastic clothing, is that our, well, maybe I'll back up a moment. Like our skin is our largest organ in our body. It's super permeable, just like, a frog's skin is super permeable. You can see that. So whatever's touching it or going on it is seeping into our skin and seeping into our body. So if I'm wearing plastic clothing, I'm just curious about, is that plastic going into my body? How is that affecting it? Energetically, what's going on there, And then I'm curious, like, well, like if I wear my buckskins, like what's going into my skin then? And energetically, how is that? I'm not a scientist in any means, but it's a thought process that I like to think about, I'm curious about. And also, I wear plastic clothing and there's no like harm in that. I just, it's just something I like to think about and be curious about. In our day and age when there's, so much plastics and so many chemicals and around.
It's really hard to avoid. I'm in the process of trying to do like a major overhaul of all of my clothes and my kids' clothes. And the kids' clothes is even harder. And you would think, and little kids, so my background's actually dermatology. I don't know if you knew that.
But... amazing. So maybe you know about this stuff.
So your skin is absolutely permeable. And even in dermatology, we kind of act like, well, we know it is, but then sometimes we're prescribing or giving things that also have these bad chemicals in them too. Or the medication, like a lot of the prescription topicals have, whether it's the steroid or the antibiotic or whatever we're using, which of course those have their own issues, but they also have their own place sometimes. But then there's these other additives and like parabens in so many of them and these other chemicals. And I'm like, how can I treat my patient and not be also giving them these bad chemicals that I know they're absorbing? And babies absorb so much more. Their skin is like this delicate, like their whole body is just like this little delicate absorption. And we're putting plastics on them, chemicals on them. It's really, really scary.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm super interested in that.
Well, it's so funny that you say the baby part because people have told me that I should advertise my sheepskins as baby, like for babies, because a lot of people buy sheepskins for their babies, but there are a lot of like chemical tannery, commercial tannery sheepskins that, are stripping them and then putting a bunch of bleach on them. And I'm like, oh my God, this poor little baby is going onto this little bleached skin. And like, what's happening to its skin? I think about all this all the time. And I'm really curious about my hormone cycle and just like the health of my body in general, but all of the hormone disruptors that are in our clothing right now, and chemicals in our clothing, and how is that impacting my cycle, my fertility? Like, will I be able to have a child? Like, these are all like questions that like I think about when putting on clothing or choosing my skincare, or and that it goes into my thought of why I'm a high tanner. I don't know if that makes any sense because it's like a big idea, but
it's all connected. I mean, I think that. Again, it's hard for me sometimes to separate myself from other people because I am so interested in this. And I know that I think the average person might think like, wow, high tanning is like a little like I'm never going to do that. Or you know what I mean? Like it might seem really far fetched for a lot of people. But when we look at it from this standpoint and you're like, this is the most natural material. This is the material that humans were using as their clothing for thousands of years. And that this is actually what we were meant to be wearing. And now how far removed we've become from that I've heard something recently that a lot of times even the like commercially produced wool and cotton clothing still has a lot of chemicals in it, which is so disappointing because you're just like trying to find, what you can wear that doesn't have bad stuff in it and is natural or supports sustainability, just the sustainability of clothing, which we know is fast fashion is a horrible industry. So it all comes back full circle to this.
Yeah.
And to the importance of your work.
Hide tanning or tanning hides is the most sustainable fabric or fiber that there is, or hides are, I guess I should say, because there's so many of them. There's thousands upon thousands of animals killed with roadkill for food in various different ways, whether that's hunted or domestic reasons. And the way it can be produced with bark and brains on small scale is so sustainable. It's like, it is the most sustainable clothing for us, and also can be used for. People used to make houses out of it, or, our lampshades or our windows, or the ways that we use plastic now, we could instead be using rawhide. Skins are phenomenal in so many capacities. It's incredible.
That's a really good point because that makes me think about when I was younger, I was super anti-fur because the fur industry was a bad industry, right? It was like killing animals just for fur, raising them just for fur. It was a different thing. They were chemically tanned. And so I think some people are still holding on to that a little bit and not understanding the difference here. And the fact that, like you're saying, you could be using roadkill, but also all of the deer that are hunted, almost, I forget the exact stat, which maybe you know better than me, but I think it's like 90% of the hides are discarded because people just don't know how to tan them, don't have the time, or don't know what to do with them.
And then the other industries too that have all these hides that people are just wasting, that could be valuable things. And then you realize again that this is the way we honor those animals. If you can use every part of the animal, you're honoring the animal. And to me, that is so much better than, it's not the same as wearing fur from a factory farm or from a factory fur farm. It's an honoring and love of the animal and appreciation of the animal. That's the big difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like to think a lot about, well, I'm a hunter now. So there's a certain carrying capacity. I live in Vermont, so there's a certain carrying capacity in Vermont for all the animals that are there. And the way that Fish and Wildlife does their regulations is that we can kill based on the carrying capacity of that land. So those animals would die anyway, either because of starvation or because of the cold winter, right? But instead, we have this opportunity to harvest them as food. And so I can go out and harvest them as food, and then I can also use that skin for clothing for myself and produce that clothing in a way that is, brings life back to the soil. Or I could choose to, buy a fur from a commercial tannery that's either produced with a lot of plastics that have to be, they have to be made. It's not a resource that is already there. It has to be then made. And it's just going out of this loop, the system, or it's not a closed loop system. Mm-hmm. Those plastics are produced elsewhere. Those chemicals are produced elsewhere and then put on those hides and then sold elsewhere. And it is a interesting dynamic and debate with, vegan furs or people who are really interested in fake fur, where in reality, it isn't as sustainable. There is not that closed loop. There's a lot of chemicals and plastics added, and it's not coming right from my back door and giving back to my soil.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Like thinking, oh, this is vegan leather, so this is better because an animal didn't die to make it. But what were the other consequences of that product?
Yeah, and where's there's death somewhere in there, right? Like, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about being a hunter, being the one that's holding the knife per se, or holding the gun per se. Like I'm the one actually doing the killing. Whereas if I were to buy from these big factories, that killing is still happening, because what's really killing our animals is big infrastructure, losing their homes to roads, to infrastructure. So that death is still happening, but I'm so far removed. And so it's almost as if there's like a moral hierarchy that I've been thinking a lot about, because that death is removed. But yeah, I want to be in relation with that. I want to be responsible for those deaths personally. But yeah.
That's interesting you say that, because I feel the same way, and I call myself a baby hunter because I've been going out for a couple of years, but this was the first year that I got my own rifle and like sat out for deer season. Didn't get anything yet, but I'm planning on it. But I used to be vegetarian for like 10 years. I was vegetarian like teenage years into mid 20s, because I thought that was what was best for my health and because I loved animals. And now I'm choosing to eat meat because I believe this is the healthiest for my body, but I care about where it comes from. It needs to be well raised. And if I can't take responsibility for that death and understand, that this was a creature, whether I harvested it myself or raised it myself, then I don't really deserve to eat the meat. Like I don't know. Or maybe not deserve is the right word, but I want to be like, I have to face this. If I want to eat meat, then I have to face this, because that's how it's supposed to be. Not this disconnect that I bought it from the grocery store and I have no idea where it came from, but I also didn't see it as a creature that was alive at some point. So we're actually raising a pig right now that is getting processed next week, and it's going to be really hard because she's just one pig. So I care for her every day, feed her every day, look at her out my kitchen window, and I'm already like, oh gosh, this is going to be so awful and so hard, because I've only done chickens and birds before that we've raised. I've never done like a larger animal that I was in such a relationship with. So it's going to be really difficult, and I don't know how it's going to go, but I know that I gave her the best life I could, and
appreciate her, and we'll always think of her and be honoring her every time we eat that meat. So I'm hoping that that's the best I can do,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, isn't that where the care comes from, right? Like sometimes it's the people who raise them and the people who hunt them that have that connection. That's, you know, I personally, like, that's where all my care comes from. Knowing those creatures, knowing that land, being the one to see it raised, like having those tears when they, when they pass, and being ever more grateful at every single meal that I eat. Like, so grateful. I like to use the term story adornment, which is something I like to think about a lot. It's kind of like living a handmade life, or like living with story. So every time you pick up that bowl of food from that pig, you're like, you remember that pig, and all those days that you cared for it, and you remember what it took to give it death, or to process it. And to me, that's like all the more connection for my life. That's what I live for: wearing clothes that are story adorned, eating bowls of food that are story adorned.
I love that, story adornment. Yeah, so true. Every hide, if you have something, clothing you made from it, and you remember the work that went into it, or if it was a deer you harvested, you'll remember that specific animal and that hunt.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So, where do you get your sheepskins? I mean, are farmers I've actually wondered this with sheep farmers. I know that wool is hard for them to process into yarn and to get, to make a profit from. Like, people kind of think that that's a really profitable business, but I've heard from sheep farmers that sometimes it really isn't. And it's kind of a big process to harvest the wool and then get it made into yarn or wherever they're going to sell it. Are there people that are just giving away skins, or from the sheep that have died naturally too, that maybe they just aren't going to utilize, or are they asking for payment for those skins as well?
Yeah, it depends. So I have different relationships that, need or want different things for the skins. So, There's some butchers I get them from, and some of them I pay a small price for. Some of them, they would have to pay for their compost anyway, so they give them to me. Some relationships with some farmers who, it depends on what they want. If they're excited about getting rid of them and seeing them to get good use, they'll give them to me. And some of them are like, I cared for this really well, and can you pay me this price? It's all around the board. It depends on who I'm engaging with and what their needs are. But yeah, all my skins come from either farmers or butchers, or people, homesteaders in Vermont. And the price or the whatever is based on their needs.
I haven't had experience tanning sheepskin, that I would love to learn at some point. Is there concern with, I don't know the process with this as much, of soaking it, and how do you keep the wool from felting in the different ways you're processing it?
Yeah, mostly I haven't had a big problem with felting. Mostly I'm cleaning my hides before I tan them, and just using some soap and water, and I'm washing them by hand. And it depends, all this, I get different varieties of sheep, so they have different wool. But I haven't had an issue necessarily with any dreading or felting any of the hides, because it's so gentle the way that I'm washing still, and it's all by hand. Yeah.
Do they get smoked as well?
So if I am grain tanning, yes, they get smoked. If I'm bark tanning, they don't get smoked. Yeah.
Okay. Because I didn't realize until recently also that there's these little bugs that like to eat hides, which I'm sure you know about.
Yeah.
And I had actually a rabbit's hide that I had done with you that I have on this little altar, and it has gotten little holes in it. It was smoked too, but maybe not enough. And I don't think I properly fully tanned it because it's a little stiff, but it has all these little tiny holes in it. It's crazy.
Yeah. So there are these little things called hide bugs. And if your hide isn't fully tanned through, they generally come and eat, parts of the flesh in your hide. If your hides are fully tanned through, then generally they won't ever come. And a lot of the times, if your hides are being moved and used, and you're just moving them and touching them a lot, hide bugs won't come either. I have never had hide bugs come to my hides because I'm so particular about, tanning them fully through. But it makes sense, especially like as a novice tanner, to have hides that have some flesh in them. So it's just good to move them around, and smoking them
Yeah, and
does
this
help
was
though.
definitely just sitting for a long time, like in my office.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens. It's just like a part of it's a living thing, like living like
Yeah.
other bugs eat living things.
Yep. Something else I want to ask you about. So I'm trying to do a hair on deer hide, which I know is controversial because a lot of people say it's kind of pointless because the hair breaks so easily and it's hollow hair. What have you found? Have you done a lot with hair on, and what do you use them for if we're not, we can't use them as a carpet, etc. So what do you use them for if you keep the hair on a deer hide?
So I generally don't keep a hair on a deer hide unless I have, a client who really wants that.
Mhm.
Because as you said, yeah, deer hair or ungulate hair in general is, well, I guess not ungulate hair, but deer hair and moose hair is hollow. So their hair isn't sticking into their skin as well. So over time, it will start to shed, um, and that skin will lose its hair. So I don't tend them hair on because of that reason. But when I do have clients that want that, I just suggest that they do use it for a rug, honestly. Like put it next to
Oh,
their bed, or like, put it in front of their bathroom or something. And it should be okay generally. But yeah, eventually the hair will start to roll out.
okay.
Yeah. Oh,
And
and I
yeah,
am mostly bark tanning all of those.
you are.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I was trying to egg tan the other side, but a piece of it broke off. Well, I have it on a frame, but it's been sitting outside like most of the winter, which I know is not good. And so I took a piece off, and then I was like, I'm going to bring this in and add a little bit of moisture back to it and see how it works. And it was like tearing so easily. Like it doesn't feel like I could have worked it really, really well. And now I'm worried that the whole rest of it is also going to be like that. Is that something you've encountered where it's
Like
like
the skin is
tearing?
tearing.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I definitely couldn't be like rubbing it on a stick or working it the way we would normally work a buckskin, at least with these small pieces. And I don't know if it's just because it was just a small piece, or now if this whole hide is going to break that easily as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you said you left it outside in the winter. Yeah, it sounds like it was starting to break down, and have some rotting in it so that it's now falling or like falling apart in some capacity. So yeah, I would imagine that the rest of it would be similar to, or like respond similarly to that small piece. Hides in general, they really like, they were living creatures. They really like
Hmm.
attention. Um, at least in my experience, like they don't like to be left. They
Okay.
like to be like used and worked properly, and even when they are done, like I think they like to be used. That's just like my energetic thing. But even when I teach my classes, I'm like, yeah, like when you're softening it, it doesn't really want to be put down. And just in general, even like preserving it, all those things, I think um it's yeah, whenever like you take a step away, there can be some degrading or something happening. They like to be loved.
I think that's the hard part for a lot of people who are novice tanners, because I know in my area there's a lot of deer hunters and a lot of people who have tried at some point to tan a deer hide or make a buckskin, and they've all failed or something went wrong. But mostly it is because it's just so time consuming, and that is put it aside, let's go back to it, or then something happens to it, or it gets ruined, or they let it rot before they even got to those other steps. How much time goes into softening a buckskin for you?
Oh my gosh. Well, it depends. It depends on the size of the deer. And if it's a small doe, not as much time, but if it's a big buck, like more time. And it also depends on if I'm doing any cheats, like freeze thawing it in the wintertime to help it get going or help the softening process. So in general, I would say anywhere between 4 and 12 hours. And sometimes, generally with my buckskins, I don't tan twice. So that's generally just that one time I'm either softening from 4 or 12 hours. But occasionally, if anything goes wrong, which is very seldom, I'll have to do it twice.
What's your favorite bark to use for tanning?
Oh, I don't know, honestly. I think I'm still on my journey of really understanding all of the barks around me and connecting with all of them. I would say right now I'm really excited about spruce. Um, But yeah, I think I'm still in my relationship journey with all the different barks that are around me. Yeah.
I didn't even realize really you could use spruce. I was always thinking like the high tannin barks, like very specific ones, but that's really neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me think what else I want to ask you. I do kind of want to get it more into hunting a little bit because I think because I'm also a new hunter and am coming from it from a similar approach to you of like this value and care of the animal. And as a woman hunter, it was hard to get into. For me, at least, I don't know if you might have had more connections than me, but I didn't have family members to teach me. I wasn't raised hunting. How did you learn and approach hunting as like, was this something that you were taught by family or did you end up like kind of seeking it out on your own as well?
Yeah. I think it was really hard as a woman to learn how to hunt and still is. I did not have any teachers as in my family. I sought out a lot of different men to teach me, and super grateful for all of those relationships and all of those teachers. And honestly, had to go out of my comfort zone a lot, to hang with, older men or, just a certain culture that, I wasn't super comfortable with at the time. And even now when I go into the woods, I haven't yet run into another woman personally. I hear other women tell me that they're hunters and I see it on social media, but
somewhere.
I'm like, so this season I ran into a lot of men. Yeah, so it was challenging. It brought me out of my comfort zone, but now I feel like I can hang with that culture a lot easier, but it took a lot. It was really hard to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Gotta figure out how to get more women hunter teaching.
I know. Well, I don't know if this exists, but we have here Maine Women Hunters Facebook group. It's such a great resource and it's so awesome. And there's women, female mentors and trips and just everything just geared towards and women hunting and women fishing. And we really needed that space. So if Vermont doesn't have that, you should create it.
I know. I've been looking for that in Vermont. I'm like, is there something? I don't know, but that sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah. Just make a Facebook group.
Super cool. Maybe I will do that.
So I'd like to hear a little bit about your diet. I've only seen some stuff. I actually don't know much about your dietary history or, I know you said food was kind of one of your initial things that got you into this path too, which I found for a lot of women, like a lot of people I know started as a vegetarian as well and kind of are now like completely different because we're learning more about nutrition. But what kinds of things are you eating on a regular basis and how are you supporting your diet in this like animal-based lifestyle as you mentioned?
Yeah. Well, I first want to start off by just saying that my diet has changed a lot over the years. And I think I've always had, what has stayed consistent is that I've always had a reverence for the story of my food. So knowing where that food is coming from, whether that be working for the farm that food is coming from or, hunting those animals or foraging that food. And then I think a few years ago, I was on a journey, as I kind of mentioned it earlier, but to balance my hormones and regulate my cycle because I was having a really challenging hormonal cycle. And I had some nutritionists that I was working with, and they were just like, meat, like increase your meat and increase your fat intake. So I think over the past few years, what has been really important to me is eating a lot of meat and fat. And I think also in the past few years, what has been really important to me is moving more towards wild foods. And that's always been important, but I think even more so now, where, even more so now. So generally, and it fluctuates depending on who I'm eating with and where I am. But if it's up to me, I'm generally eating like 2 to 3 meals a day, and mostly it's like some wild meat, whether it's deer or beaver or some fish that I got or turkey, that plus maybe some eggs and a dollop of bear fat. And then depending on the season, right? Like we're coming up on spring, so ramps are coming in and like wood nettles will be coming in and dandelions. And so like I'll start to add that into my diet too. And I don't eat a super huge amount of carbs, only when I'm really craving it. And I'll eat like some root vegetables or some fruit or something. And yeah, it depends though. If I'm like at my home with my family, I'll eat more of that. And if I'm by
Yeah.
myself, I'll eat less. Oh, and also I'm obsessed with milk. So I do drink a lot of milk with like raw eggs in it and some maple syrup sometimes when my body can handle that, and like some vanilla, and like make like a milkshake. I drink that so much.
Raw milk?
Yeah, sometimes raw milk. There's a there's a dairy down the road from my house, and it's like lightly pasteurized. But it just like tastes, it's the best milk. It's so good.
And you tolerate dairy fine?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't. I'm like really severely lactose intolerant, but I have been my whole life. So I'm just like, no milk.
Yeah. Yeah. You
But
gotta
I see all these people loving it. But I mean, if you tolerate it and it doesn't bother you, then yeah.
You gotta listen to your body. Like my body is super sensitive with sugar, with any form of sugar, even that if it's maple syrup or honey or fruit. And I wish I could eat more than I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, my feet will swell, or like I'll get headaches, or yeah, it won't tolerate it now in my life. And I'm hoping that at a certain point in my life, I'll feel less stressed, or like feel a little healthier and be able to tolerate it more. But yeah.
Did all of those nutritional changes end up, helping the issues that you were discussing with your cycle? Did everything get more regulated once you had incorporated more fat and meat?
Yeah, totally. I wouldn't say all of the things went away. And I think healing and health is like a lifelong journey where, there's always going to be different factors in my life that like different symptoms will come up. But incorporating more meat and fat definitely gave me more vitality. I have, less headaches. My feet don't swell anymore. I used to have, like a lot of period pain, and a lot of that has gone down. So yeah, it did definitely helped in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that I think I've been eating meat now for like 8 years, and I still love red meat so much. I think years and years of being a vegetarian now, to me, it's like it's like this gift. Like
Yeah.
my body just craves it and wants it, and it's like, yes, we need this.
Yeah, totally. I crave it like so much. And I'm curious. I'm 29 and I haven't had a child yet, but I'm curious, like, if I was fertile beforehand when I was having all those health issues. I don't know, because I never got tested or anything, but I'm curious if I was then and if I am now. I'm curious about fertility rates, and yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. Well, you're still very young.
We'll
You
see.
got plenty of time ahead of you.
Yeah.
Well, that's super interesting. I love diet and lifestyle stuff, and because I feel like, again, we've come on like a similar journey in that regard, and a lot of women are of embracing meat and embracing high quality meat, animals that are raised properly, and realizing that we are meant to eat that, and that supports our body the best way possible. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. I forgot to add one thing, which is actually
Yeah.
super important. I think it made me so much happier, frankly. I struggled a lot more with sadness and depression beforehand. And now having what feels like a more robust diet, I just feel so much more clear in my mind and so much happier. Yeah.
That's a really good
Easier
point.
to access.
I do too. I'm so much happier than when I was a vegetarian, but I've always attributed it to, I actually can't have gluten either. So I'm like one of those people, gluten-free, dairy-free.
Yeah.
Cutting gluten out absolutely lowered my brain inflammation. All of my anxiety, depression went completely away when I stopped eating gluten. It was amazing. But a few years after that, I also started eating meat. So yeah, it's maybe a combination of both. Just that whole nutrition and gut microbiome improved so much to help with mental health as well.
Totally. Yeah, I don't eat gluten, so I think it's
Oh, you don't need to do
parallel.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm also super sensitive to sugar. And I've often wondered, like, am I really gluten intolerant, or is it just that these carbs are so high in their glycemic index that that's the same kind of thing? I'm getting this like massive inflammatory response from it.
Yeah, that's what I like to think a lot about. Like, not only are sugars like fruit, like I think a lot about like gluten and sugar and like starches and like all the same vein, because they're processed in my body as carbohydrates. Whereas like fat and meat is processed differently in my body. It process as fat.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I like, my body likes to process the fat and the meat way more than the sugars. So yeah, I kind of like conceptualize the gluten and the sugar kind of in the same vein, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think everyone's bodies are different. Like, obviously we might have a similar constitution in that way. And then other people can tolerate these carbs or, I don't know. I just meet people who can eat, it seems like anything they want and they don't get a stomach ache and they don't have a negative effect from it. And I don't know how much of that is just being out of touch with your body's signals or just they truly can tolerate way more than I can. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And also I like to point out, like, I live in northern Vermont. So like, if I were to walk in the woods and never go to a grocery store, like, the food that I would be eating would be generally meat. But if I lived in a tropical area, I don't know, like, maybe there would be more fruits or coconuts or, more fish. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I like to think that plays a huge role in the health of our body.
Yeah. Yeah. Where you live and living like that bioregional diet.
Yeah.
I'm super interested in that too. And that sometimes, like, if I look around, I think I discussed this in another episode recently, that whenever I go out in the forest, I'm looking for food, even if I'm not planning to like be eating there right now. I'm like, what could I eat if I was here? What would I eat if I was living here? And sometimes there's not a lot of plants. I've been foraging most of my life. I'm super into foraging, and that's what led me to hunting, to be like, you know what, like, if I don't know how to hunt and fish, I really won't be able to eat in some of these environments. Like, I can't just rely on plants. But knowing your plants is obviously super important, but I think that, that's not always available.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a huge shift for me to think about, like, going to get food rather than going to the grocery store, to go to the woods. And yeah, to think of the grocery store as the woods.
Yeah. I mean, do you still go to the grocery store too? Like,
I do go to the grocery store. Yeah. I get my milk. Get some eggs,
You're not keeping any animals yourself right now, or do you do any gardening or anything like that?
I do some gardening, but no, I don't keep animals. I just hunt them. And yeah, I think I'm past the stage in my life where I want to raise domestic animals. Not saying that would never happen, but yeah, it's not something I want right now. Yeah.
So what is an average day like for you if you have a hide tanning day, or how do you work out your day?
Really, really, really different depending on the season, like incredibly different. And yeah, really different depending on day to day. So in the summertime, a lot of my days are either like waking up and tanning hides and, or, waking up and going fishing. And then in the fall time, it's a lot of waking up and going hunting. And in the winter, it's a lot of waking up and selling my hides. And springtime is kind of like catching up back end. A lot of those things are going fishing or, it's like super dependent based on the season and the day and the work that needs to be done versus the play or the food I need to go get.
Are you focusing on buckskin or deer hides at a certain time of the year and then sheepskins another time of the year? Or is it just kind of like are you kind of switching back and forth between different hides?
Yeah. So, in the summertime, I'm focusing on all my tanning essentially. But big focus is sheepskins and then my personal projects, whether that be like right now, I've got a moose racked up for summer and some bears and some beavers.
Nice.
And in the springtime, I do a lot of bucking my my deerskins because the weather is such that it's not too warm. But kind of in the fall, I do a lot of picking up of my hides, both sheepskins and deerskins and whatever else, since it's butchering and hunting season. So I do a lot of picking up and preserving them. And in the wintertime, it's kind of like rest. It's mostly just sewing all of that stuff together. Yeah, I would say like bulk tanning seasons are spring and summer. And it's kind of all of them, all the different kinds. Yeah.
And you teach a lot of classes too, right?
Yeah, and my classes are mostly in the summer as well, because it's tanning season. We have that warm weather. But I do have a new class this year. It's a whole animal processing class. So we're going to give death to a goat and then process it all, use its bones, its hide, all of its organs, make food with everything. And that's in like kind of like the early fall. And then I'll have some sewing classes coming up this winter.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you use sinew for all of your sewing? Do you hand sew everything?
I don't hand sew everything, but I do hand sew. I hand sew the things that I'm wearing, that are like my clothes. And then as far as my business goes, I've been hand sewing hats for sale. And some of my vests I hand sew as well. But I've started to use the machine on bags or certain other things. And as far as what I'm sewing with, it depends. Sometimes, like for myself, I often use just like buckskin thong to sew. But for a lot of the things that I'm selling, I'll use like a cotton waxed thread. Yeah.
And when you machine sew, did you have to get a special kind of needle or a special kind of thread for that? Because it is pretty thick for a machine.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've been trying to get a grant to buy like a heavy duty industrial sewing machine because I really, really, really want one. But right now I've been using like the sewing, like a Singer sewing machine with a heavy duty needle. And honestly, I sewed the other day, I was sewing, or like this past month, I was sewing fanny packs for sale. And I think I sold, or like, I think I made like 15 or something. I was making 15 or something, and I broke 14 needles. And I
That's what I
literally
was waiting
kept going
for.
back to I kept going back to the sewing store being like, so I need another pack of needles. And she'd like look at me like, what are you doing? I was like, I just don't have the right sewing machine. I'm using what I got here. So, yeah, hopefully in the near future, there will be an industrial sewing machine for me. But right now, I'm sticking to my Singer.
Yeah, I was wondering because I was actually gifted this beautiful, like white, super soft buckskin that I believe was commercially tanned by someone my husband knew, gave it to me because he had hunted this deer in like the 80s and had it shipped out and then never did anything with it. And now was like, I'm ready to part with it, but it was like very meaningful for him still. And so it's beautiful. So I'm like trying to figure out what I can sew with it. But I tried to hand sew it with just a regular needle the other day without an awl or anything. And I like bent all the needles with that. And I was like, oh, I should use a sewing machine. I'm like, but what kind of needle is going to get through this too? And it's still super soft. Like it's not that thick, but I think it's just still, thicker than most needles can handle.
Yeah, well, you can use a heavy duty sewing machine or heavy duty needle on a sewing machine. Or if you're hand sewing it, you can use, it's called a Glover's needle. It has like 3 points. And that's what goes through buckskin and leather really well.
Okay, I have to do that.
That's my favorite thing. Yeah.
Have you ever made a knife sheath with buckskin where you had to put like something harder inside to support it?
Yeah, I've made a knife sheath with leather, but never buckskin. But yeah, you could just, I've made rawhide knife sheaths. So you could just like make a rawhide knife sheath and then put a buckskin one over it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of doing.
Yeah.
How often can you, like when we talk about, I know you said you don't like to put hides down and they don't like to be put down, but how many times could you like set it down and it kind of like dries out a little bit and then re-moisten it? Or I know some people, I'm in a lot of these like hide tanning groups that will say like they put a wet towel and like roll it up. So is there a method that's best if like you do have to set it aside?
Which depending on what are you asking about? Like
I guess I'm speaking more towards buckskin at this point, but
if it's buckskin, if I have to put it down, I generally will wrap it up in like a little ball, put it in a plastic bag, and put it in a freezer. Because then it'll just like preserve exactly where I'm at in the softening process. Other than that, though, I generally won't put my buckskins aside. But if I'm leaving for like, if you're leaving for a few minutes, I would roll it up and put it in a really cold spot in the house. Yeah. Or outside, wherever you're tanning.
And I know the salting them is kind of controversial. For some reason, I've heard people say they don't salt their skins, and some people do. I think I had seen that you probably got a big shipment or a big amount of deer skins in, and you salted them and had them outside. Is that how you just store them until you're ready to work with them?
Yeah, I like to salt my hides. So there's a number of methods to preserve your hides. You can dry them out or freeze them or wet or dry salt them. And I don't freeze them because I'm picking up, 100 hides a year. So
that's too many.
I don't have freezer space for that. Drying them, I also don't like to do because they can attract more bugs to them. And also you have to flesh them before drying all of them. So you'll have to like flesh them and then rack them and have a nice dry hot climate to dry them in. I don't have that since I'm picking them up in fall in Vermont. So it's generally wet or snowy, and I'm picking up like 20 at a time. So I don't want to flesh them all. I also don't love dried hides anyway because they take a long time to rehydrate when you're ready to tan them. It takes a lot of water to rehydrate a dried hide. And sometimes you can't even get it to like the wet floppiness that a raw skin would be, which can be problematic when you're bark tanning. So I salt my hides and I wet salt them because it keeps them that like loose pliableness of the raw hide. But that salt is also there so that not a lot of bacteria can grow in it. However, it's not like preserved forever. So generally I like to like just keep them for like 6 months or so, because if you're keeping them over a summer season or keeping them longer than that, this bacteria, it's like a halolytic bacteria, can grow in it, and it can cause like little red or purple stains on it, and that can start breaking down the hide, which isn't super great. So I just like to process them within time. And then I guess there's one last way of salting them or preserving them, which would be dry salting. And again, it's just like you're salting them, but the hide dries out. So again, like you would need a lot of water to rehydrate it. And oftentimes when you're dry salting them, sometimes what I've seen is people don't always flesh their hides super well. So when they're dry salted, then there's these like, it's called grease stains or grease burns on the hide when, like the grease or the fat of the hide will soak into the hide and then cause this thing called a grease burn, and you can't, it breaks down the hide and you can't like get it.
So when you say wet salting, are you making like a paste almost with the salt, or are you just soaking the hide and then putting salt on it?
So wet salting just means that I'm not letting the hide dry entirely. So I just picked up this raw hide that was just, butchered, and it's like still wet and floppy, bloody, like there's still probably some flesh on it. And I'm just putting like a thin layer of salt on it, non-iodized fine salt, and kind of letting that soak in for 10 minutes, and then putting another layer of it on it and another layer of that fine salt. And then I'm rolling it up like flesh to flesh. So salt to salt, and then putting it in a box and like letting it drain because it's still wet. Like there's still, like blood and myoglobin and stuff like coming out of it. And then I'll just let it sit. So it's wet salted because I'm not letting that hide dry out completely. Does that make sense?
Are you leaving them outside through the winter though?
Oh yeah, I am leaving them outside, but generally in a, I'll roll them up and put them in like a plastic bin or something.
Oh, okay.
But if you had just like a nice, garage or something you could put them in, that would work too.
Mm-hmm. And are you soaking your hides in anything to help get the hair off first, like lime solution, like people do with the buckskins? Yeah, with buckskins in particular, I did a lot of rotting last year. So I did a lot of just rotting in water, or controlled rotting, I guess is what I would call it. I didn't love it. And I think I've used that, and then lime, or I guess your options are water, rotting in water, putting it in KOH, lime, or ash. And honestly, my favorite is KOH because it's so controlled. But there's benefits and downsides to all of them. But my favorite is KOH, and I've done and do all of them generally. Do you just leave it for a couple of days? Is there a point where you've left it too long and something bad's happened? Yeah, totally. So the hides, like if I leave it in water for too long, it's like so smelly and the hide just is gone. It like breaks down. If I do it wrong in lime, it's just like the hide has disintegrated. Or if I do it wrong in wood ash, sometimes the hide like inflates and becomes like a piece of rubber almost. It's crazy. I have had my fair share of messed up buck hides. And do you always rack them? Is racking really necessary? Because I see a lot of people who don't seem to even use that. Is that just more to like get it flat and really do a really good scraping, or what do you do? What do you personally do? Buckskins, you mean? Yeah. Still talking about buckskins. Yeah, I don't rack my buckskins. You don't? Yeah. I mean, sometimes I will for softening, just
if my body needs a break or like my hands need a break in a different way of moving, I will rack them just to soften. But other than that, I don't rack my skins.
So do you flesh like over a bench with a fleshing tool and then you take the hair off the same way?
I flesh over a beam, a fleshing beam. And I also take the hair off that way too. Yeah, but like not with a knife, just my hands or a wooden knife.
Oh, because it's just coming out more easily at that point?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm worried that my hair-on one is ruined now.
Why? Why would it be ruined?
Well, because I did have it on the frame, but I was thinking in my mind, because it's winter and it's been basically frozen, that it would still be okay. It doesn't seem like it's rotted. It is kind of firm, like it's pretty hard. And so, but now I'm worried if I bring it in and like rehydrate it, it's just not going to be worked at all. And how do you, I guess that's the other big question I have. And this could be for sheepskin or anything that you are leaving hair on. How are you working it like you would a buckskin when you have a whole other side that does have fur hair that you're trying to preserve and maintain on it?
I am not exactly working it like a buckskin. I am racking my hair on hides because then I'm just using a stick or like an ulu or something as I'm softening it and just softening that one side. I am curious if yours, the one that you have racked out right now is okay or not. I'm curious if it, it's frozen outside. So ideally, if it's in a dry space that's racked, it should be fine. But if it got wet for any reason, that would be my only.
That would have ruined it.
Yeah.
Because it would have been like getting wet, freezing over and over.
Yeah, and it's in a unstable like place right now. With the hair on. But I don't know. There could have been. There's always so many. There's so many variables with hides in general. Sometimes when things happen, it's like, it could have been this, but like also like there's weather, there's wetness, there's just so many things.
Yeah. I think that's why we need people like you to teach hide tanning, because I am in so many groups where so many people are trying to self-teach, and I am too, but there's so many little mistakes or little things along the way that can go wrong. And you just hate to waste these materials. You want to make sure that you're really doing your best and honoring them. So it's important to learn the proper technique.
Yeah, hide tanning is a hard thing to self-teach. I mean, it's awesome to self-teach it. And also there's as I said, just so many variables that it's really helpful to have someone to talk to.
Oh, what do you have coming up next for your classes for people to attend? And then where can people find you online or on social media?
Yeah, so my business name is Close to the Skin, and you can find me on my website, closetotheskin.com, or on Instagram at Close to the Skin. And I have a number of things coming out. Right now, I have a small batch of fanny packs coming out, and in the next couple months, I'll have some silk and rabbit fur pillows, which I'm psyched about. But as far as teaching goes, I have a few classes this upcoming summer. There's a pelt tanning class, a sheepskin tanning class, a brain tan buckskin class, and that whole animal processing class, which is like a few weekends of camp out and processing that animal. I think they're all going to be especially fun this year, and it feels really exciting.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Coleen, that was an awesome conversation. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a review. In that review, I would love to hear what topics you'd like to see covered next and which guests you'd love to hear from in future episodes. You can connect with me on Instagram at Original Being Podcast, and be sure to follow, like, and share the podcast on all platforms to help spread the word. Thanks for listening.